Well, hello, everybody. This is Nancy Laine, and today is May 7th, 2015, and we have a very special guest today. His name is Vance Arnett, and as you will see on your screen, he's a professional coach for entrepreneurs and professionals in transition and those about to retire. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, Vance.
My pleasure, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
You know, you and I met on LinkedIn, and that's, of course, what Project Transition USA's core mission is to teach transitioning military veterans and their families how to use LinkedIn to network so they can get to know the people they need to know, to get the kind of careers going that they really would be happiest doing. And so I'm pleased that that's how you and I met, too, through a common acquaintance. Another veteran. Actually, he's not a veteran, but he's a very good volunteer with us. He's a photographer who's been at several of our workshops on MacDill Air Force Base, Ryan Gautier, and I'm very grateful to Ryan for introducing us. And so Vance, I know that you're an Army veteran, and I just really liked that immediately, of course, because my dad was an Army chaplain, and it's always great to talk to somebody that understands that life. And I know you've helped a lot of veterans. I mean, what types of, can you tell us a story maybe of how you got into this thing of helping veterans? And I know you do this for veterans for pro bono. I was extremely impressed with that. Tell us a little bit about how you got started doing this.
Well, actually, I got started working with veterans as a volunteer shortly after I discharged from the military, back when I was much younger than I am now. And I went back to school at the University of Kentucky, and one of the things that I did to readjust to being back on campus, because I basically went in the military immediately, almost 4 days after I graduated from the University of Kentucky, and it was strange. Almost 3 weeks after I got back, and I was back in the same house. And about to, waiting to go into graduate school. And I had a lot of time on my hands. And a friend suggested that I go down to the occupational therapy at Veterans Administration and volunteer there. So that happened way back in 1973, and the different kind of returning veteran back then, different kind of war, different feeling upon the part of the public about who we were. I don't know if you read in the Tampa Tribune here recently. It was a very interesting, there's been a lot of talk about the end of the Vietnam Wars, particularly with the PBS series. And this veteran talked about how he was treated, and I had the same experience. I even had a cab driver in Columbia, South Carolina, suggest to me that he'd pull over and let me change so I wouldn't have to fly home in my uniform. And I explained to him that, my ticket wasn't any good unless I was in that uniform. And he was a very compassionate guy, had been through that before. A lot of people were getting out of the military in Columbia, South Carolina at Fort Jackson. So I just kind of laughed it off. And I'd been in the airport about 10 minutes, and somebody called me a name and spit on me. And at that process, I guess I sort of started feeling different and talked with other folks. When we got back, when I did get back into the community, and of course working at the Veterans Administration there, you ran into different people. And it's been kind of a recurring theme to me. I mean, the soldiers of today are much different. Their training's much different. It's a different kind of warfare. It's insurgency warfare where you have to be trained to make a decision in a heartbeat about who's friend and foe, because it's very difficult to tell. And we didn't necessarily get that kind of training back then. And I had the pleasure of working in the intelligence field, where I had an opportunity to kind of get more understanding of who we were up against and what was going on. And that translated into a very new shift in the military and a much more thinking approach to soldiering than there was back then. And it is a complicated process, but it's also mission driven, and it's within the structure of the military, and you're required to make some instantaneous decisions. And so those sound like things to me that could translate very easily for a veteran that would want to re-enter the work status right now, because those are all things that are worth a lot of money out in the workplace right now.
Oh, you bet. It's interesting to me to hear that you went to work directly with the VA. So many of the people coming through our workshops on MacDill Air Force Base want to work with the VA because they have such compassion for helping other veterans.
Well, it's that's not hard to. You have a tendency to want to depend on each other. You've been trained to do that.
Sure.
You've had to function as a unit. Now, particularly with the team concept of platoons and everything, there's a better understanding of the human dynamics of working together. And when you're looking for a job, there's this has come up in the excellent discussion group that we have on LinkedIn. When you come up for a job, the company wants to know, why you, why us, and how well to get along with people. And most people underestimate the ability of an ex-service person to be able to get along in very difficult circumstances. I mean, if you can talk to a group of tribal chieftains in Anwar, you can surely talk to a group of folks in a commercial or a business setting and make your voice heard. I think a lot of people don't understand that the modern military has trained folks in things that are really necessary in the American economy, whether it's in manufacturing or service industry, in terms of showing up and being present when you get there. That's certainly that is certainly a requirement in the military. As a matter of fact, a lot of frustrations I run into with my veterans that I work with go, hey, I showed up and the recruiter didn't even bother to call me and tell me it was rescheduled, or I was there for the meeting, or don't these people ever stand by, the appointments they make? That's because for the entire time, whether it was 4 years or 20 years, the military has said, if you say you're going to be here, you better show up.
Yeah, that was just a given. In fact, I was going to ask you if you'd tell us a story or two about veterans that you have been able to help. I know you do a lot of looking at. Just tell me a few things that you do with them. I don't want to guess here, because I know that you've already been so kind and talked to a couple people that I've referred to you, and I know that they were extremely appreciative. So what's usually the first thing you do?
Well, we sit down and I try to figure out where they're at in their search and what they expect. I mean, coaches are funny folks. We're not consultants. We don't, I've got the plan, just follow these 6 steps, and within 6 weeks you'll have a job. I've been out there myself. I know that's crazy. Coaches kind of ask you questions, and in the process of you contemplating those answers, you discover your own route. And then coaches, if they're good coaches, help you stay on that route and supportive of you and check with you. And it's not too different from being a squad leader or a commanding officer, if you want to know the truth. It's how are we doing? What do we need to do to get there? What kind of resources do we need to develop? Because finding a job is mission-centric. And so I've helped everybody from corporals to colonels in the transition. And Nancy, I think that's an important thing to understand, that this is not a simple transition.
Yeah.
The way of life, the culture of the military, is so different from the culture that's out here in the modern American workforce, and it's so different from the culture that's in more and more for veterans, the modern international workforce. And so you have to be able to adjust, learn a little bit of a new language. And so if I'm talking to a colonel, one of the colonels I talked to brought me that very question. I just don't understand how people can sit there and earn money as a recruiter. Now remember, the military has recruiters too.
Sure.
And just not be there when somebody shows up, or not return a call, or be unresponsive to the plan that we had set up. I mean, there's a lot of, I've talked about this. There's a lot of businesses out there that are farming the military transition portion of our population by making them be responsive to new, new products rather than a new process, I guess is the best way to put it. And so you can end up spending a great deal of money to get some help from an executive search team that has absolutely no applicability to what's going on in the marketplace. So you can pay for the headshots, you can do all this kind of stuff, and they say, don't worry about it, we'll call you, and then the phone never rings. So I've got a real, I've talked about, why I've been a little bit reluctant about putting my military. It's certainly on my webpage where I'm very clear that I don't think I have ever, in the time frame that I've been a professional coach in the last 5 years, full-time, I've been a professional coach for a long time, but on my own, 5 years, I don't think I've ever accepted any money from a veteran because they are so responsive once they get their plan down and their mission done, and they're so driven. One of the interesting ways I got involved in this, my last job in the justice system, was to assist in an expansion of a veterans court. A lot of these veterans we were running into that got in trouble with the law were not criminals by any means, but there was either an adjustment problem or a frustration problem or a symptomatic function of traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic shock. And they were some of the most responsible folks in the court system because they'd show up when they were told. They were respectful in the court, and they were compliant with everything that they were given. So they could be almost totally addicted to drugs and still be some of the most successful folks because the judge would tell them to get into that program, and they get into the program, they give it 100%. That's why you see a lot of the most successful statistics are related to those kind of special courts. We have one in Hillsborough, there's one in Pinellas. And my job is to kind of clear the way and set a program and find some funding for a special type prosecutor who would understand what veterans have been through, would work as a team with the court and with the defense counsel to try to make sure that those folks didn't have to waste their time in jail when they could be in another justice response for that thing and what they had done and become useful citizens much more quickly, and we wouldn't, didn't work in all instances, but it certainly had a high percentage of success because of their military experience. So you don't turn your back.
That is so amazing. A special court for veterans. That is so humane. So
well, it's becoming.
I've never heard of that before.
Well, it's in Pinellas and Pasco. So it works with the veterans organizations and with veterans volunteers. Again, the camaraderie that's built through mutual dependence for survival is a huge issue, and quite frankly, one of the things that just to go back to a short story, I had a non-commissioned officer had been in for 12 years, literally for most of his adult life, had not known anything but the military, and was convinced that there was nothing for him. He was an infantry and a platoon leader, and as you talk with them, and I'm always very careful to say, tell me what you did, not why you did it, who you did it to, and where you were. Just tell me the daily tasks that you did, because one of the things that most people should be concentrated on is helping veterans translate those tasks into commercial service manufacturing terms. The average E7 now, before they leave the compound, signs for way over $1 million worth of equipment every time they leave.
Good point.
And they're responsible for the survival of everybody that they've been assigned to. And the same thing for the officers that are there, and that travels up the chain of command, that you just don't take any of that stuff lightly. Show me a really good executive or CEO out there that has that kind of concept, and I'll bet you when we scratch the surface of that bio, we're going to find that they were in the military.
Very possible. I know that the ability to be a good team player and build good teams are such a common skill that that our transitioning veterans have. And, when we were talking about how it sounds like you went straight into the justice system when you got out of the military. Is that right?
Well, I didn't intend to. I went into graduate school and ended up doing some field research, and ended up in the justice system by virtue of some of the research that I did related to the people's awareness of safety. And I'm a cultural psychological anthropologist, and so it became sort of a new field for people with my training to go into. And so with my military background, I had no problem with chain of command and those kinds of things. And my first real justice job was at the Kentucky State Police. And from there, I moved to Florida State University and was an assistant director in a national training center there. That took, remember I told you I was intelligence. It gathered information about all the kinds of things and happened in the criminal justice system, and were able to make those applicable so that the justice system could gain extra funding from the federal government, could figure out where to target their resources, could figure out how to analyze their crime process, and kind of got on the first wave of the new geoplotting for crime information. And now think about it, intelligence work in that, you can see that intelligence is basically applied research. We take little bits of information, and when you organize it, it becomes intelligence. And then you take the leap to the justice system. When you vet it to the evidence level, then it becomes evidence. So it was a kind of a natural transition. I was privileged to be put on some incredible projects. From FSU, I moved to the governor's office for a few years, and then came down here and joined the Pinellas County team as a justice programmer, researcher, and planner, and was able to study problems holistically and come up with solutions, and then kind of finished up my tenure of 35 years by working in the prosecutor's office on special projects such as how to reduce juvenile crime, how to make a bigger impact on first youth gangs and then all gangs, because there's I used to talk about the fact I used the Insurgent Warfare Manual to talk to people about how we needed to deal with gang leaders, because they operate the same way. You can't tell one from the other unless they're all colored up and they got their bandanas on and everything. So it was just kind of a natural progression. The entire time I managed and dealt with my people as if I was a coach.
Sure. Talk about transferable skills. We were talking earlier, remember, about how a lot of times when people get out of the military, they really haven't spent much time thinking about what they want to do when they get out. And so they are very appreciative of guidance and just different ideas that they might consider. And, you always hear about military veterans that have become policemen, right? So that's not something that's that unheard of. But the kind of thing you're talking about is a little different. I mean, do you think that there's an opportunity in that direction for people to go into the justice system, veterans?
Well, it depends upon the nature they have. Certainly, law enforcement and corrections is the biggest portion of it, biggest part of the justice system. But you know what? A lot of fine lawyers came out of the JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office, and for a long time following the conflict I was involved in, law schools were giving special. When you come out of the military, you either go into education or you go into a job. If you can either go back to a job you had, but of course, the history of recent involvement is that the involvement, when I was in, you were in 3, 4 years, 2 years if you were drafted, and you were only in theater maybe a year at a time unless you volunteered to go back. That's not the case with these deployments, and so you could essentially been a plumber one day, called up, fulfilled your commitment, and it just remained. Kept going, kept being recalled, and everything else. That's the nature of an all-voluntary military. And the situation at home wasn't nearly as supportive as the situation in the military, because you could have been a plumber and then come back, and not only was your job not there, but the whole company was gone. because of because of the economic situation, and it was stressful on relationships. All war is. Some survive, hopefully. A lot don't. And if you've grown up in a military environment like that, which most of us do when you go in the military, there's not a whole lot of time to remain, sort of a 24-year-old child or a 19-year-old child. You better grow up pretty quickly in that regard. And you come back. First of all, you're changed. You have a much greater value system related to things that a lot of people take for granted.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of person definitely has a place in a justice system where people are asked to do so much with such a limit. I mean, it's a government supply chain. It's money that we all give, to stay protected. So
I was just going to say, I was recently talking to an attorney, a military veteran who got out of the military. He's an attorney, and he was telling me that at least here in Tampa Bay, I mean, for those people who are listening to this that aren't in Florida, you may not recognize the names of our counties and all that, but that's what we've been talking about here. We're in Tampa Bay, Florida right now, and I was told that there's literally like a sweatshop of a bunch of attorneys that don't get paid that much money, and they literally all work in a room. And like it's really difficult for a lot of attorneys to find work. I had no idea how difficult it was. And so, but when you started talking about special courts just for veterans, do you think that might be something that's a cutting edge type of occupation?
Well, I think that certainly when my boss over in Pinellas County decided that we were going to make a commitment to that, he turned to a very well-known veteran on our senior staff and made that happen. I was assigned to do the nuts and bolts behind the scenes, find the money, let's put it together, let's get the grant written, let's work it out how we're going to make it, how we'll fit into the process. But it had been designed and developed really long before that. We were just fitting into one component. But people have a tendency to they sort of from a veteran standpoint figure that we all get it. We're much different. Every veteran is different when they come out through the process. But the one thing they have in common is that they've been in the military, and the biggest sacrifice, other than to be your life and your body that you put into this process, is your trust in the people that you. It's a giant leap of faith. I can tell you can talk to 1,000 veterans, and they will remember getting off the bus at boot camp. They will remember that. I can still remember it. It was October, and it was in Fort Knox, and I could pretty much tell you, everybody still had their hair, and back in 1970 when I went in, they had a lot of it.
That is so funny because I lived on Fort Knox when I was 4 years old, and that's where my sister was born, when my dad was a captain in the Army.
Yeah, you remember those things. There's a lot of common, mindset. Let me bring up one more thing that is really pertinent, and particularly about the work, the great work you do. LinkedIn has always been one of those things that I really have to work on with veterans. Not how you do it, but the fact you need to do it. And you have to remember that a lot of veterans have had it hammered into their mind that you don't tell people what you're doing, where you are, what your mission is. You don't share this with anybody. I mean, the old World War II slogan, "Loose lips sink ships," that kind of thing. And so now all of a sudden you got some fool like me sitting here, free or otherwise, saying, "Oh, by the way, you got to put most of your pertinent professional data out here on a web where everybody can see it."
Oh, I'm sure I know. I hear it all the time. I mean, I bet
all of a sudden
it's harder than I even realized.
Huge mind shift there for people who have basically lived their entire life with a large attention to what they said and where they said it and who they said it to. And now all of a sudden you're saying, okay, let's take your professional life and put it out here on this giant, wonderful billboard. And let it go. Just let's see what happens. We're going to go fishing in a big pond. full of some fairly hungry fish, and not only that, on LinkedIn, you can kind of figure out which section of the pond you want to go into, and we're going to tweak your bait. That's what you put on LinkedIn, and by the way, we're going to tell them that you've got military experience in this process and get it going, particularly when you're in the transition phase, when you're looking for a job. And they look back at me and they go, "Are you crazy?" And maybe, but not on this. Yes, gentlemen and ladies, maybe, but not on this. So it's always worked, by the way. Just have to tell you that a lot of the best contacts, that and teaching folks how to network effectively. First they got the old dictum in business. First they got to find you, then they got to like you, then they got to trust you, and then they give you money. Same thing for a job. And getting past those screening systems that people use, so that you have to put that exact word chain in your resume. You have to put that somewhere in a cover letter. Not a bad idea to have a bunch of those somewhere on your LinkedIn page where the computer that's been hired, whether it's in-house or offshore, quite frankly, that's going to search through that and sort the people that have that chain, just like search engine optimization in their stuff, and discard it if it's not. Those are the kind of talking people into that process is mission-driven stuff. It's taking a look at where you're at, discover all the tools that you can use, apply that to be successful in your mission. Gosh, that sounds like a military function, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it's structured, and it's trackable and measurable, and it's like managing a project. There's so many of our people with project management, program management skills, and they, when they finally get this, I mean, I know what you're saying, Vance. It's like you should see their jaws drop, in our workshops on McDowell when we're saying, and we'd like you to write in first person and talk about yourself and what you've done on your profiles, and let people get to know you as a person, because that's, frankly, what we're finding is there's a lot of people that have the skills that are required for these jobs out there, right? But the employer's main problem is finding somebody who will fit in with their culture. That's their issue. And so what they're, they can look on the resume to see if they've got the skills, right? I'm sure you'd agree here. And it's like, not only that, but of course a resume can only be 1 or 2 pages, at least on a corporate resume. And so they go to their LinkedIn profile after that to get a feel of who they are as a person, to see if they'll fit in. And if there's nothing on their profile that gives them a sense of their personality and their passions and their interests, and maybe if they've done volunteer work to indicate that they're givers, that kind of thing, they look like a robot. They look like a resume, and too many people are doing it that way. It's like I'm harping on this all the time, but it's really hard for them to get this at first, because if anything, you're discouraged from networking in the military, aren't you?
Well, you're not discouraged from networking. You're not discouraged from networking within the specter, but you're certainly not told to go broadcast what you do and what you're good at and where you've been and where you're going. And isn't that what a resume does? So it's a very natural process. The other thing that I found is that my military clients are very humble about what they did, because they were surrounded by other people that were doing the very same thing. Yeah. And so, here's the way I have helped one of my folks in terms of not just rewrite a resume, but rethink who they are in the modern job search. And that is, how did you feel when you came back from a mission and you had everybody accounted for? I felt relieved and good. The response is always, so how would you describe that to somebody? I don't think I can put that in words. And I said, well, one of the statements you can put in is served as a platoon leader in 4 deployments, and I'm proud to say came back with the majority of the people I was assigned to keep safe. That's telling someone who you are in a way that lets them know that there's something more to the military than the rank system and what they do. Now, I've got the best place in the world here to do it, and I hope this is okay, but I'm a hockey fan and I'm a Lightning fan, and that's a good thing to be right now.
Hey, but we're so close to the playoffs. Go ahead, talk about it.
every game, they recognize a military service person. Every game.
Isn't that great? The Tampa Bay Lightning are awesome.
And they do it in such a way that has actually touched other teams that are here. Tampa is a military town. There's just no question. It's got a lot of good things going. One of the best things
Central Command. Special Operations
One of the best
Command,
things is MacDill Air Force Base, and the work that the business community has done and the civic leaders have done to make sure that they step up for the military. It's not just driven by the fact that it's a great economic engine for the area. It's driven by the fact that it's really hard to see somebody stand up in front of a crowd and be recognized for just having participated and been willing to sacrifice.
So cool.
And the most interesting thing about it is that crowd, that's the second largest applause that they get. There's another large thing where they recognize community leaders who make a sacrifice to help the rest of the community. But there's just something about that, the way they do the national anthem in there, which is sung here most recently by a technical sergeant from MacDill, at least for the last 30 games I've been to, and she has become a celebrity.
Aww.
And so you take the military face and you put it out there. That's helping everybody understand better what it takes to become a member of the United States military today, whatever branch, whatever service. And
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
It just is. It's something that brings people to their knees. It cuts at their core value. They understand it now, and it does an old soldier like me good to see veterans finally recognized like that, recognized from the human side of it rather than necessarily the ingrained or ungrained politics of what was happening with the particular conflict or the particular era that they were in. And it does a lot of Vietnam veterans, a lot of people who served during the Vietnam era, which quite frankly was a tumultuous time to be in the military at that point. You know, you go through the process, and it's a very interesting dynamic to see how people operate right now, and it's gratifying for me. I think there's
so wonderful.
There's one category of veteran I do want to mention, and that is that veteran that comes back from the military or is still serving in the military and doesn't have a CIB, doesn't have a combat infantry badge, weren't deployed. You know, one of the largest statistics out there right now that's concerning the military is the number of suicides among non-combat personnel. and every time I talk to somebody, I try to make them understand that when you go into the military, you take your life and put it on hold. And you turn the next period of time over on trust and faith alone to your command structure, to the service that you're working in, and you trust that they'll take care of you, they'll take care of your family, there'll be things there. And to be sure, the folks that have been battle tested, it's a huge, huge element. Don't get me wrong. But you can't forget that for every person on that battlefield, there's probably 5 or 6 or 10 whose job and mission is support, who haven't
never in combat,
who still deserve, for no other reason other than the fact they said, hey, you can have me to the next 4 to 6 years. I'll take whatever I was going to be doing, stop it. I want to serve my country. And however the military decides that you're best of service counts. And if you show up every day and you do your job and you stay on mission and you keep after it, and you move forward, whether it's to get your university paid for because there was just nothing else out there. You know, you'll know we're being successful in our effort, Nancy, when you don't have so many folks re-upping just because that's the safest and best place they can go to have a career. I'm not opposed to that. Don't get me wrong, but they ought to be made to feel that when they come back, I've never met a service person that says I deserve this. I've met many service people who said, I'm appreciative of everything that happened. And I've met a lot of them who say, you know what, they said they were going to do this and they didn't. I guess I didn't really understand what a preference was for military. That's easily understood. You know, we all understand preferences from the culture that we come from. And so you understand the preference of rank, and you understand the privilege of it, and you understand the work that goes into it. And so saying, look, we're going to give you a couple of extra competition points, or we're going to give you priority in coming back to school, or you're going to have priority in funding. Those are all really necessary things, as long as the veteran understands what's given in return. And so I'm very tough on companies that I run into that say, oh, yes, we encourage veterans to apply. And then my next question is, what's your percentage of placement?
No kidding. Good question.
And, well, I do this for a living without a net. I ask questions. So, you know, the process is then, please don't come to me. I mean, I'll have companies say, well, how come you've never steered anybody our way? And I'm not a job finder. I'm a applicant preparer, you know. And so I said, well, what is the preference? What's the veteran going to get out of this from the standpoint of the amount of time that they're going to spend applying in your system? If you're going to tell me that they're going to have to show up 3 or 4 times, and if they say, okay, well, they're automatically granted an interview. And my response to that is, the person that's conducting the interview trained in understanding what a veteran's going to say or what they may not say about what they've been doing. And they look at me and they go, well, why would that? Is it a veteran that's conducting the interview a veteran? Is the person that's working for your company a veteran screening veterans? And they go, well, I didn't think that was anything. See, the other culture needs to learn that process too. And
I just had somebody tell me that when he went through an interview, a veteran told me he was very taken aback at first because there was 2 hiring managers waiting for him there, and one was a veteran, and it turned out to be a wonderful experience. He got the job. That veteran translated a lot to the other hiring manager, and I thought, what an amazing thing to have a team,
there's a
civilian and a veteran.
Company that you take seriously. There's a company you take seriously.
No kidding. I loved it. You know, and he was offered the job, and he's very happy. In fact, now he keeps getting more offers. We've had so many success stories, and then I get invited to their retirement ceremonies, which is just like the icing on the cake for me. You know, it's just been incredible doing this. It's been such an honor, and Vance, I really appreciate your time today. Is there any, I was just going to say, is there any other quick story you might want to end this up on about somebody that came to you, for instance, and really didn't know what they wanted to do and what they ended up doing? I mean, can you give us an example?
Sure. There was somebody who came to me, and the veteran was, I sometimes will take them through a identification of strengths process.
Sure.
It's a very simple book you can buy, and then they go online and they take it, and we start discovering some of those innate things that they're, and what they thought they wanted to do was very closely related to a very tightly structured thing they did in the military. They were in public relations, sort of, and
public affairs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but more in the terms of schmoozing the local governments and you know, I just really think I would be good in this process. And as it turned out, they were absolutely well suited for the other end of the spectrum, where they were analytical, they were future oriented, they were comprehensive in terms of looking at things from a 5,000 foot level rather than a 2,000 foot level. And I suggested there's a resource I use, ONET Online, which is a federal jobs component, but you can search this website.
We talk about that in every workshop. Great site.
You can search it from interest, from skills, and from strengths.
Let's just say that real slowly so people can find it. It's ONET.
ONET Online.
Online.
.com? And online.org.
.org. Oh, I knew there was something about that. Okay.
If you just type in ONET Online, and it'll take you right to this.
Okay.
In the search
engine. Yeah, that's a great site.
But you don't necessarily use it to find a job. You use it to find a career or a category of employment that might be interesting to you.
And translating your military terms into civilian terms, I've heard it's been helpful.
Absolutely.
A lot of people
and
with that too.
This individual decided there was something there, and I said, let's just take 6 weeks and take a look at this particular thing. I mean, I know you got letters out there. I know you're interviewing with a variety of different media outlets, and one of the things about the military that's so interesting is that you can be an E5, an E6, an E7, and doing things that out in the commercial world, somebody at the mid-level C-suite, the commercial suite, the guys that are making the decisions about the entire company are doing. It depends upon, there's so much in the military that your MOS depends upon where you're at and what you're doing. And it doesn't necessarily fit the same structural process for modern American economy right now. Well, it turns out that this individual did that and came back with another successful job at about $10,000 a year higher, was immediately pulled into an interview.
What was the title for the position, if you don't mind me asking?
The title of the position was a senior trainer in marketing and dynamic. In other words, taking research that's done and training folks on how to employ that. Very, very technical.
Marketing trainer. Interesting.
Well, it was more of an analyst position for a marketer that would then train folks in the same kind of process.
Okay.
And there's that ability to speak, but the ability to take a look at data and translate it and move it into, pragmatic behavior on the part of a company.
Actually using it, the research shows.
And in that particular instance, we love the technical field in the military, and so those guys have got all sorts of that security clearance is worth big money to companies out there that are engaged with DoD and those other things. The biggest transition I run into there is the people who've been in the military get on the civilian side of that, and it's a completely different world for them. And then the coaching turns into one of, okay, let's take a look at this culture and figure out how we can fit here, because once again, in the military, the expectations are kind of finite and set. And there's not a lot of wiggle room. And believe me, in the modern industrial complex, from the civilian side of the DoD, there's a ton of wiggle room. And those are just a couple of different applications there, where if you've got somebody that is really willing to do the work, it makes my job easier. And so I'm able to help veterans with much less effort on my part than my average clients that I get, because they're motivated.
Because they do the work. Interesting.
You got to show up, you got to be authentic, and you got to do the work.
Yep. I was just going to say, I know a lot of what you do, and I was going to ask you, what don't you do? And you can't do everything for them. I get that.
Oh, I actually do very little for them. I introduce them to some tools that are out there. I ask them to interpret their own results. What do you think of that? In the modern world, you have to be at peace. Your career has to meet your needs, your basic needs that you've got, and some of the higher order needs. And it can't be outside the purview of your values. So most people hate their job because of those two conflicts. There's either a value conflict, or it just doesn't scratch it, or it doesn't play to their strengths, or even if they did everything, it's just a job. It's not a career. A career is something you can get done easily and you don't mind doing. Now, a calling is something that fits you like a glove to the point you'd do it for free. And so you want to aim for somewhere between career and calling in that process. I make all my veterans research the potential company that they're going to be with before they go in.
Is there any kind of books that you find yourself recommending them to read for finding their calling?
Actually, I don't. I used to. There's a couple of really good. Nobody reads books anymore.
Or
Nancy,
websites, or anything like that.
The work of Simon Sinek on Discover Your Why is great. Just looking at his TED Talks are great for veterans, because he takes.
And who is that again?
Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K.
S-I-N-E-K. Okay.
And his website is startwithwhy.com. But I suggest all my veterans take a look at. Go to TED Talk, type in Simon Sinek. You're going to get you'll get 2 talks back. Take them in order, because he was one of the first TED Talkers out there in Monterey, and it was legendary talk on understanding your own why, what motivates you.
And for those who may not be familiar with TED Talks, you can just type in TED, T-E-D like David, actually stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. Isn't that how much? I guess that's what it was when they...
Yeah, and guess what? They started speaking. They found that everybody was more motivated by a lot of different things.
I just love, and so these are TED Talks that we're talking about. Now they're totally accessible for free on the internet, and you can just watch them and learn so much. In fact, on LinkedIn, one of the groups that I'm a member of is the TED group, and boy, are there some interesting people in that group.
Well,
but I've never heard of Simon Sinek and StartWithWhy.com, so thanks, Vance.
One of the most useful in terms of, he talks about it from a company discovering their why. But in essence, his model applies to individuals as well. And so for ex-military personnel or soon-to-be ex-military personnel, their why has been defined for them in their MOS and where they're at and what they do. And
yeah, they're told their why. Yeah, I get that.
And well, unless your eyesight was 20/20, you become a fighter pilot or some other ace, from that standpoint. Yeah. Everybody else is out there doing a lot of grit. And the most interesting thing is that we never kind of look inwardly and say, okay, what is the stuff I bring to the table? And other people
I know, it's just a whole new way of thinking.
Other people sense it. And so my response is, wait a minute, you've been given a golden opportunity here. You're just out of the military. You're like fresh mental design. Let's discover who you really are first, and let's figure out how we can link this up in this modern system. And the other thing I say is the same thing that we say to them every day, and that is be bold. Be courageous here. This is not stuff for the weak of heart. Nobody owes you a thing. You can't, there's no entitlement process here. Even the entitlements they have, they got to fight for. So, certainly nobody's going to want to hire somebody that comes in there with a sense of entitlement, one, or they come in there with a sense of desperation. And my veterans that I've helped stay cool under fire, they understand that process, that resonates with them, and that in turn gets shifted to interviews. And quite frankly, the first few weeks of work are the most important part about job selection, because that's where you're proving whether you were the right choice, and you're also discovering whether you made the right choice. And the success of the mission isn't done until you come home at night and you sit down in your easy chair and you say, good job well done.
Oh, what's better than that? I mean, that's what our mission's all about, that's for sure. I mean, the last thing in the world we're trying to do is just helping somebody get a job that pays the bills. Life is, so much more than that. It's making a difference, and I always ask people to raise their hands if they joined the military for the money. And everybody laughs, it's true. It's like they want to make a difference. And so what better type of person to have on your team?
Truly.
Vance, thank you so much for your time today.
You're totally welcome. Thanks very much, Nancy, for the work that you do.
Thank you. You just made some great points, and I know we've given some new ideas, perhaps a different framework to, just a whole different viewpoint, maybe just hearing about how you can literally go from somebody who was, like you were saying, schmoozing some foreign government to a trainer and having never even thought that was something you'd be interested in. How interesting is that?
Well, playing to the strength of the individual and doing the same thing. I mean, if you're hired by a company and the company says, look, we are all over the place and being able to get our people to come into a central point of function. We need to look at the analytics. We need to translate those into a new mission, and we need to figure out how to get everybody on that mission. Sure sounds like something that happens every day all over the world. So,
sure
but
does.
It just takes a little bit of poking around in those kind of companies. And I, a lot of my time is spent when I meet somebody first thing I say is, how many veterans do you employ? If I'm an employer, first answer I'll get is, well, we really don't have a job, that is suitable. Well, what do you do? Well, we design software. And so the average military person has consistently been utilizing software, understand code. Military has some. Some of the stuff you're using right now is probably produced by military people. I don't want to turn anybody off of the movement, but by the same token, it's not bad to hold people accountable sometimes. I say, have you ever taken a look at your workforce and figured out, what percentage of folks there that have served in the military, and sat down with them and said, well, was it about what you learned in the military that's made this job easier or better or anything like that? So there's a lot of work still to be done.
Oh, absolutely. And it's people like you that are bridging you're the bridge. And thank you so much for what you do, Vance. I just brought up on the screen your company page for Vance Arnett Coaching.
Tell everybody not to be scared of this. Don't be scared of the tattoos.
Oh, I love your story about how you always used to hide them, and when you started showing them, you found that people just relaxed around you, and I think that's great.
Well, my clients relaxed around me. I'm not so sure if I'd have walked into a courtroom or walked into a meeting and had I was in a suit and tie for a number of years, and I had them, and nobody even knew I had them. And it was my marketing.
You can cover them up in court, yeah.
It's my marketing person that said, roll your sleeves up. And immediately my caseload was filled with some of the most interesting people that are out there. So there are old tattoos on an old guy, and I'll tell you, I can have a story for each one of them, and everybody that's out there that's got one has that story too. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Well, thank you, Vance, and for everybody that's been listening to this, just so happy to share this with you. And Vance is a member of our Project Transition USA group on LinkedIn, and I'm just going to bring this up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. And you can join too. It's not just for veterans, because it's created for the purpose of bringing veterans together, where to also start their own businesses, transitioning military and veterans. And so that's the kind of discussions we really appreciate the most. And please jump in and participate and start meeting people and commenting. And Vance, thank you so much for joining our group. It's just really an honor to have you with us. And I'll look forward to talking with you again soon. We'll have to meet for coffee again. It was great when we got together the other day.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, we'll just say over and out now, and we'll see you here next time. Bye for now.